Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded or did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
John Adams is in the studio with us. John, welcome back once again across the podcasting table here.
Thanks once again for having me.
I'm thrilled. I'm sure you are too, since you're the one that set this up. But I'm thrilled that we have Larry Groce on the show with us. And before he says hello, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Larry, just so you know who he is. He served as the host and artistic director of Mountain Stage, which is a 2-hour live music radio program, which is produced by West Virginia Public Broadcasting and distributed by NPR. He first entered into the national spotlight. Now, this is showing my age, John and Larry, when his novelty song, Food Junkie, became a top 10 hit. After that, his voice became well known by children and parents alike as a result of his platinum recordings of classic children's songs for Walt Disney Records' children's favorite 4-volume series, which ran from 1979 to 1990. And there's a lot more we could say, but let's just introduce the man of the hour. Larry Groce is on the show. Larry, thanks for joining John and I.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Number one question, of course, is why do you hang out with John Adams? Come on, I got to know that secret.
Well, I met John. I mean, he introduced himself to me a while ago. He was talking about getting music people interested in investing, especially people who are young in the music business who really didn't have any guidance or any experience. And we talked because he comes to Mountain Stage, the radio program that I've hosted now. Well, I don't host it now, but I hosted it for 38 years. Kathy Mattea took it over last fall, but I'm still working on the show. With John, you know what he's like. I mean, he's kind of irrepressible. So we got to know each other, and then he told me he had this thing going, and I said, well, this sounds pretty interesting. I listened to some of your podcasts. I thought they were great. So I was happy to become a part of the whole thing.
I have never actually considered the word irrepressible with John Adams, but we're going to go with that. So, John, I may from now on just introduce you as the irrepressible John Adams.
Well, I have surely been called worse. Matter of fact, maybe even last evening. So.
We have a couple of mutual acquaintances, one of those being Michael Martin Murphey, and you guys went to school together.
Yeah, Michael was older, but we both went to Adamson High School in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. It's interesting. A lot of musicians have come out of Oak Cliff, some of them very famous, like Edie Brickell, Stevie Ray Vaughan, but Michael Murphey and Ray Wylie Hubbard and BW Stevenson and I all went to the same high school in a 5-year period, which is pretty odd. I don't know, it's a coincidence. I don't know why that happened, but I still am in touch with Ray because he's been a guest on Mountain Stage multiple times, and so has Michael Martin Murphey, been on several times himself. So BW sadly died in his 30s a long time ago, but that's our acquaintance, and we always looked up to Michael Martin Murphey. He was like the dean, the head guy. He did it. We all hoped that we someday could do what he was doing, write songs, and then put out his own records. It was a big deal.
He is still a living legend in the music industry, and whenever you mention his name, you can see people's eyes light up, and they remember, of course, Wildfire and Carolina of the Pines, and he had so many great hits in his career, and he's still out there at his age. He's still out there touring, and of course, one of his big things is he does a Cowboy Christmas show every year that I've had the opportunity to see a couple times. But we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about you.
Yeah, he did that Cowboy Christmas, a lot of it on Mountain Stage once a long time ago, and we incorporated it into an album we did of Mountain Stage Christmas songs, and a lot of them were him. He brought the whole crew, and oddly enough, on that same show, we had Sarah McLachlan, who was a young artist just starting out.
Wow. So you were born and raised in Dallas, Texas. How'd you get interested in the music business?
Well, like everybody, I got interested in music. And when I was in junior high, elementary school, started playing in folk groups, which was popular at the time, a la the Kingston Trio and that sort of thing. And then I started getting interested from there, tracing that back to the roots and finding Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly and more of the real roots of what became commercial folk music much later. Started writing songs. I guess I found out later I was one of the very few people who bought Bob Dylan's first record. When I looked later on, I started doing some research. I gave a talk, and they only sold 5,000 of them, and I was one of the people that bought one of them when I was like 13 years old or whenever it came out, and that had a huge impact on my life. Bob Dylan, and then later the band, were people that really, I have my utmost respect, along with the people we just mentioned, who I actually grew up with. So that's my original entry into writing and doing music, and I started doing it for money in high school, and then kept doing that through college. And when I graduated, I thought I would give it a shot. I moved to New York City and then to Los Angeles and got contracts and started making records, and that's how I got into it.
They call it a novelty song, but I think any song that gets on the charts and stays up there, especially not only in the top 10, but reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, which is not any easy feat whatsoever. You were 15 weeks on the charts, by the way, with Food Junkie. How did that song come about?
Well, that's interesting. We had thought actually it had died because I recorded that at McCabe's. I'm sure you're familiar with McCabe's guitar shop, and they have a venue there that still goes, and a lot of big names like Jackson Browne drop in to play, as well as other people. And I recorded there several times, and actually I played there, and we didn't know they recorded it. And I say we because I had a manager. We found out they had recorded that version of Junk Food Junkie, and it sounded good, and it had always gone over very well. So we tried to shop it to some labels, and they had no interest. So we actually put it out ourselves on a label my manager called Peaceable Records, and we hired a promotions guy, and we worked it in 3 states. And it started getting a little traction. And we had no distribution or anything. So when the stations would call us and say, hey, you're going up the charts here, but nobody can buy it, we would actually we'd ask what the record stores were and just send them records for free. And say, if you sell it, if it'll keep on the charts, we'll send them to you. You can keep the money. And it actually started going up the charts. And then in Denver one time, it won a weekly battle of the singles like they used to do when, radio was different, commercial radio was different. And it beat out Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And people thought, well, maybe this is a real thing. And we finally got Mike Curb interested at Warner. But the negotiations for him to take it and re-release it on Warner's took so long, we thought he had killed it because they pulled him off the stations where we were.
Right.
But then when they reintroduced it, thank goodness, it came back.
And that's something, too, I think, anytime you get in, and look, I'll preface it, here's my disclaimer. I used to work for Mike Curb at Curb Records. Anytime you get involved with any record label and you get into negotiations, it can be a bit of a lengthy and sometimes trying period. And it sounds like it was exactly that for you.
Yeah, it was. And you also know, Bob, that when you do that sort of thing and you pull something out and then you think, okay, we're going to reintroduce it, that's really dangerous because people may say, oh, you've already done that and we don't want to hear from you again. But it ended up working out, even though it was about 6 months later, finally, that we got the thing finally done and re-released on Warner's. And we were just grateful that it started getting picked up. But I think, that was a different time. And it was almost like Loretta Lynn taking her records around to the stations. Those days are long, long gone. I mean, that's prehistory in the music business. And I'm glad that I got to, on the very, very tail end of it, when DJs still had some sway about what they played, And they loved the record because they could make fun of it. And you could do a giveaway on commercial radio and give away every product mentioned in the record for like $5.
Yeah, and that's true. And you brought up something when you mentioned about how Loretta Lynn went out and promoted, she and her husband Doolittle went out and promoted songs at radio. You can't even begin to think about doing that. You might still be able to go out and do radio tours at the smaller independent mom and pop stations, but it's still not, and sadly I say, it's still not quite the impact like it was when that time from Loretta Lynn up to you. And I would say, yeah, you were probably in the later days that you could actually do that and it'd still be successful.
Yeah, this was 1976, so it had to be. After that, all of that stuff began to stop, and program stations began to be programmed by single people and be pretty much homogenous around the country. And only place that independent stations maybe or college stations you could still approach personally, but otherwise no way. And that helped me. That having a hit single like that got me into the Disney realm, because I had a friend who worked for Disney, but he couldn't, he was down. He ended up being the head of their records and later head of other stuff. But when I started with him, he was an assistant and he couldn't sign me to anything. But they were looking for somebody to write a song, because in 1976, they did a campaign with Sears called Winnie the Pooh for President. And they wrote a booklet, and they went to all the Sears stores, and they needed a song called Pooh for President, which I wrote. And then it was nominated for a Grammy. And I wasn't even supposed to sing it. The guy who portrayed Piglet was supposed to sing it. But me and the fellow, I can't remember his name right now, but the very famous guy who did Pooh's voice, we did the song together, and then it was nominated for a Grammy. So that got me in the door with them, and I got to do all those records for them. Overall, I recorded on about 9 of their albums and wrote 36 songs that they put on their records, which to this day, thank goodness, still helps pay some bills.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you got your foot in the door with Disney at a time that still made good financial sense, and I'm glad to hear that's still, you're still getting that mailbox money.
I get some mailbox money, a little bit from the Disney songwriting, but a lot from Sound Exchange, because they put, you know what that is, I'm sure.
Yes.
And they collect money when you do things in the digital world. And because I sang on so many of those records, then I'll get quarterly checks from Sound Exchange, and I'm proud of it, because I joke people saying, I had Oh MacDonald as my biggest hit this month, and it's good to be identified with songs like that. They never go old.
Well, for example, I was listening to Sirius 70s on 7, I think is what they call it, Channel 7, and Food Junkie came on. This was just a few days ago, actually, and the DJ told the story basically of how that song was recorded. I don't know if you knew they went into that detail.
No, I didn't. That's pretty cool, though.
But I was wondering, does Sound Exchange, is that how you're compensated for that? Because you have to be compensated when they play your song on the radio. Yeah,
you get compensated on radio for writing the song. No, in American radio, and Bob knows this too, the overseas you get compensated as the performer. In America, you've never gotten compensated as being a performer on radio, only the songwriter. And some people are trying to change that, but the lobby from radio is pretty big. I don't know if that'll ever change. But in any case, online, if on Pandora, et cetera, and so forth, if they play your songs, then there's a way for you to get money for that. And thank goodness, a lot of people and parents, I'm sure, do whole stations, having to do with me on Disney, and they play it for their kids, and it gets recorded, and I get some money. So that's one thing I just say thank you for that.
We're going to take a short break, get a word in from one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with John Adams from Money Concepts, along with our special guest, Larry Groce.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter-performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the Business Side of Music.
In the studio with us here today in Nashville, Tennessee, the irrepressible John Adams from Money Concepts is co-hosting today, along with our special guest, Larry Groce. When you released a single back in the 1970s, it was on a 45 record, and you always had a B-side, which was, in your case, which was Muddy Boggy Banjo Man. Say that 10 times fast. Was that one of your songs too?
No, guess what? That was written by Wylie Hubbard.
Ha!
And I put it on there as a favor to him, actually. He made some money off it.
Did that get any kind of airplay, or did it just ride on the coattails?
No, he just got a little of the mechanical money for the amount of records that were sold. But the single sold a lot. It sold, didn't quite sell 1 million, but it was somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million.
In this day and in this climate, that would still be a smash hit.
It would, yeah. But as I say, things were a little different back then. But it was, all those things together. And I told this to John, and John and I have talked about this before when it comes to money. A guy like me who was out there playing clubs, I'll be going around playing the usual folk clubs in colleges. And back then, maybe making $200 to $500. $500 was huge money because don't forget, with inflation, $500 equals probably $2,500 today or more, or $3,000. But I could make a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. Well, then I had the hit song, and suddenly I signed to William Morris, and suddenly I'm getting paid $2,500 to $5,000. I'm the same guy singing the same things, and I'm not 18 or 19. I'm not like one of the Kingsmen at 16 or something, but I'm still pretty young. And all of a sudden, I start making some money, and I had no clue. My parents were not stupid, and my dad actually was a stockbroker at one time, but they didn't ever instruct me what to do. If he had money. I was married, and I was pretty grounded, and I wasn't doing dope at that time. I didn't even drink, so I had those advantages. But I still had this money, and what do I do? And I talked to some people, and they turned me on to an accountant in Los Angeles, and I had a meeting with him, and he said, well, the first thing you want to do is set up a retirement plan so that you don't pay taxes on all this money. You can avoid as many as you can and save the money. And I wouldn't have known that, but thank goodness somebody pointed me to him in 1976, so I started an IRA SEP, turned into that. It was Keogh first, but then IRA SEP, which I've had ever since then. And so thank goodness, I can live off that now.
And that is probably something, and John can testify to this too, because we both work with people within the entertainment industry. Obviously, what John does is far different than what I do. His is more of a financial aspect, and mine is more of a consulting and an informational aspect. But so many young artists these days, and once again, you were making money then that even with inflation doesn't really equate to what a lot of artists are making now. But if you had to give them some advice starting today and they were starting to get a little nest egg, would it still be that you need to probably set up a retirement account?
Absolutely. You need to talk with somebody, an accountant or a investment counselor who you trust. And that's the key. They don't have to be brilliant. They don't have to be the greatest managers ever and promise you outlandish returns. But for goodness sake, put it somewhere where you're not going to immediately spend it. And obviously you can invest it in a house or something. But on the other hand, don't go out and buy a $100,000 car just because you get a check for $200,000 from somebody. Instead, sadly, there are too many people out there, you know them, Bob, you know them, John, who would easily take advantage if they could. I mean, most of the people are honest, but you don't always get steered to them if you don't know. And you don't have anybody to advise you. They should come to you, Bob, and say, what should I do? And you can give them some ideas of who to go see. And I think, for God's sake, do something. Don't just have this money waiting to be spent somehow.
Yeah, the musicians and folks in the artistic community that I've met over the course of the last several years, it seems they don't even think about this. And I know there are exceptions, but I think just having a trusted advisor, and I agree with Larry, somebody like Bob initially, maybe a manager or something like that, just steer them in the right direction. But I've seen a fair amount of avoidance behavior from some of these folks as well. They just, for some reason, don't want to do it.
Because the thing that really ticked it off with me, Bob, that started it was I was on ASCAP. And I was making pretty good money from junk food, and it was my time to re-up. So ASCAP in 1976, it was, I think, in order for me to re-up on ASCAP, gave me an advance of $50,000. So 1976, you figure that's worth probably $300,000 today. And I didn't know what to do. And that's when I talked to some, and unfortunately, I knew some people who were very honest, who had been in show business, not in this kind of business, but in show business. I knew these guys whose studio I recorded in. They were three brothers, and believe it or not, they started in our gang comedy, the Little Rascals.
Oh, yeah.
They were part of that. And they'd been in show business forever. Their mother was a child movie star who made 76 films by the time she was 20 years old, and then she quit because her parents said, you're going to get ruined. You know, she was in films with, Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. And so these guys told me, you got to go see this guy. You got to do something. They weren't trying to get my money. They didn't care. They were nice guys, and they were good guys. I was very fortunate that I had that kind of advice. And hopefully people somehow find you or find honest people who will tell them, give them some real advice about what to do. Not that you shouldn't celebrate and spend a little money if you make a bunch, but goodness gracious, put some of it away.
I see it on television, and I read about it quite a bit in the news, where a lot of professional athletes, entertainers, musicians who really come into large sums of money. I mean, we're talking life-changing income. Once in a generation paychecks that, probably nobody in their family has ever seen. They're the first to do it. And it is life-altering, and they go out and just do crazy, stupid things. You talk about the $100,000 car, or they'll go out and they'll buy a $5 million mansion that they won't ever need. And then, some years later, when it starts to dry up, the career, with anybody in pro sports, it's, age is your biggest detriment there. In entertainment, and especially in music, things change and tastes change. And you're hot today, you may not be hot tomorrow. And, you can't fully expect that revenue stream you make every day is going to stay that way forever. Did you see that early on? Were you able to be aware that this may not last forever?
I did after just a little while, and I experienced what everybody does in that situation. When I was on The Tonight Show, Merv Griffin, and I was on the Midnight Special, American Bandstand, all of that stuff, and I began to hear from a lot of people, relatives and others who were my great friends.
Yeah.
First, it was, at first I didn't understand what was going on, but it didn't take me too long to wise up about what was going on, and also to realize that I began to realize that this probably was a freak incident, because the kind of music that was popular was not the kind of music that I was making. This was, the song was really, I thought was a pretty good song. It's more of a satire than wasn't a total novelty song, but because it was funny and it was satiric, it had some substance to it. But I realized I probably wasn't going to go down this road. It was not the road that I was best at. And so therefore, this was probably in some ways a one-off, even though I'd hoped for a year or two, I hoped to have some follow-up. But I didn't want to do a follow-up with another funny song. So I didn't have quite the right management to do other things. And I wasn't the right person. I'm not blaming it on anybody else. But not at first. But I did realize it after a year or two that this was pretty likely something that I wasn't going to see one of these every other year or every year.
Some of the vendors in my business have, and a lot used to have, departments specifically set up to deal with professional athletes and entertainers and things like that. And I remember one of my associates from one of those vendors a few years ago telling me that a typical NFL player is broke after 4 years.
Wow.
Because essentially they're good people, but they get money for the first time and they buy their mom a house and they buy everybody they know a house and all their buddies that, help them along the way. And I think that coincides with, the average NFL career is only like 4 years. You have your Tom Brady's and these other folks that are absolutely the exception, not the rule. But the typical career is about 4 years.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those folks, they're realizing, oh, my goodness, I'm out of money. And hopefully some of them got a degree in college or are able to transfer the skills they have to something else. But that's very real.
And I don't know personally because I was not friends with the Grateful Dead guys, but I read a while back that even the Grateful Dead, who were carrying around some hangers-on, it got up to be over 100 people they were carrying around. Even they finally had to say, you know what, we got to get real about this. We can't pay for all this stuff for everybody. So if that's true, surely if you come into money through entertainment, the arts, or sports, you really should think about it. Even if it's not huge money, even if it's just good money. Say you get a job and you're playing steel guitar for George Strait. That's, and he hires you by the year and it pays pretty well. Well, then you got to think about that. We just had Robert Earl Keen on the show. I don't know if you know him, Bob.
I do.
He's another Texas guy, and he's retiring. And we were the only radio show he came to do as part of his retirement tour. He's a great guy. Even though he's not a huge star, he makes good money, and he pays his band a salary. And he has for 20-something years. And they've worked for him. And they were talking, the drummer and the bass player who've been with him for 25 years and more, they were saying, wow, I'm not sure what we're going to do now. Yeah. I hope that they had planned ahead. I didn't talk to him about that, but I was hoping back when they were making steady money, they put at least, like anybody should do, a little bit aside every month while you got steady money.
Well, Bob, I think this might be a good time to transition a little bit because Larry's mentioned the show and some guests, and let's talk a little bit about Mountain Stage because, being a West Virginian, I know I'm very familiar with it. Run into folks in Nashville as well that are very familiar with it. This show is broadcast all over the world, and it's respected worldwide. I think it's a great story how Larry got to West Virginia and how he got this thing up and rolling. And he's still active and I think creative director, but transitioned the hosting over to Kathy Mattea, who I'm sure you've heard of and probably know. Larry, why don't you tell us about how you got to West Virginia and started Mountain Stage, because it's a great story.
I was living in Los Angeles, and I got a call to come and do a job in West Virginia. And I thought they meant come out and do some concerts. I said, sure, I go to the East Coast, I go all over the place. But the guy who called me, who I didn't know, was named Lunas McGlowan. You know that guy?
I don't.
He's famous. He and Gunther Schuller wrote a bunch of books. He's an academic and he was a musician. And he did things like he wrote the theme song, I think, for Charles Kuralt's, when Charles Kuralt used to do the thing on CBS. He was from North Carolina. I think he found out about me because at one point I did a religious album that was produced by Kay Kaiser, the old band leader, the College of Musical Knowledge. And Kay knew Lunas. Anyway, he called me, and what he was really asking me was if I wanted to have a 9-month stint for the National Endowment for the Arts, a grant. I didn't even know what the National Endowment for the Arts was. I didn't know how to apply for a grant. But he said, "Oh, look, if you're interested in this, we're gonna give it to you." So I came to West Virginia, talked to some people, and I thought, you know what? it was at that transition period I told you about where I was thinking maybe Los Angeles is not the place for me and commercial music is not what I really want to do. So I decided to take 9 months off and come to West Virginia and do this program, which is called Artists in the Schools. Okay, I did it for 9 months and worked in communities and schools and met people, and I fell in love with this place. And for many reasons, I decided I want to stay here. So that was 50 years ago this October. And I've been here, and I'm a West Virginian now, and that's how I got here. And after working out of here, I did Food Junkie out of here. I was living here. Most people think I was living in L.A. or New York, but I wasn't. I was living here, but I had a manager in Los Angeles, so I would be out there a good bit. And we did all the shows. I did everything from West Virginia. And when all that cooled down, that's when I was out playing, and I got the offer that West Virginia Public Broadcasting wanted to do a show. And this was after Prairie Home Companion had gone national. And they wanted to do some kind of a live music show along that line, and once a month. So that's how I got started. I said, sure, I'll be happy to help you with that. I had been a guest on Prairie Home Companion 2 or 3 times. In the beginning, we did a little bit like they did with comedy and other stuff, but then we realized that wasn't our forte, and we quickly switched to just music. And since then, it's been a number of musical guests playing live. This will be our 39th year this December. We hope to celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. And we're now on about almost 300 stations, and we're heard by about, conservatively, a couple of 100,000 people a week, some directly on radio and some now by podcast, anywhere from 200 to 250,000, because the podcasts depend on the artist, of course. You get more for some than others. And it's not huge. We're not the Tonight Show, but we're still a place to jump off and start getting known. So we get solicited by all kinds of managers, agents, and publicists, as well as artists, of course, but mostly the former. And we still have friends who used to come when they weren't known, and they still come back, thank goodness. And then some don't, because they move on, and I understand that too. We had Jason Isbell on several times, and he's just coming back. We talked about him coming back in a month to be on the show, but he said no. Instead, he's going to go to the venue that holds 2,000 people and make some money, and I don't blame him. I would do the same thing. But that's who we are. You'll hear a lot of emerging artists, and then you'll hear some people that you've heard of, or some people who are very well known in certain genres, but not necessarily the pop genres. That's what Mountain Stage is. And as John says, I've only worked as a contract person. I don't work for the public radio here as an employee. I work as a contract. So I'm starting into my 40th one-year contract. And after this, I'm going to be totally out of it. But I'm still artistic director, and I still do a lot of other things, and I'm training people to take over what I did. And I still also substitute for Kathy, because she's not quite finished concertizing. So the next show I'm going to host, and I'm going to host a couple more this year and one next spring. But after next June 30th, I will no longer be doing that at all, unless we have some kind of special deal that I make specials or something. We have so many great performers on. We've had every format, from reel-to-reel tape to hard drive, over these years. And we have a kind of a treasure trove of stuff that we're going to dip into. I'd like to try to make some best of kind of things. And we did a bunch of those with John Prine's record label a while ago with Al Bonetta, but we would like to get back into that again. So that's kind of the nutshell story of Mountain Stage. We've had thousands of people on it over the years, and many of whom you know their names very well. The biggest probably was R.E.M. They did the show because they wanted to do something different, and we appreciated that. But we've also had country people and folk people and people from Africa, just all kinds of acts. That's what Mountain Stage is.
Well, last time Larry and I had lunch a few months ago, he told me something that I did not know, did not remember this, but you had Barenaked Ladies.
Yeah, we were the first place in America. Barenaked Ladies really did something on media. They weren't known. They were known in Canada, but not here. And back in 1995, Bob, we had a show that featured Richie Havens, Taj Mahal, Barenaked Ladies, and Rusted Root. And I said, if we'd have had that show 3 years later, it would have had to have been in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Barenaked Ladies is, if you are a Big Bang Theory fan, those are the folks that wrote the theme song to that show. But also at the same time, going down the list of of who's been on the show, and you said thousands of acts, but there's some that have really stuck out for me. Some of my favorites, like Tori Amos, Fish, Bruce Hornsby, I understand has been on your show, and Judy Collins, who I actually, my wife and I got to see perform a few months ago, and still an amazing talent and a great artist on stage. And then, of course, Martina McBride, and then one of my wife's favorites, which is Toad and the Wet Sprocket, were on the show. Yeah. So you've definitely had a very eclectic mix of entertainers on that show.
Yeah, no question. And Judy, by the way, right now we're kind of in planning with the West Virginia Symphony to do a special mountain stage that Judy comes and plays with the symphony as part of the show. And we do some other things too. Judy's been a friend. She actually, believe it or not, Judy Collins actually performed Food Junkie with the Boston Pops one time.
Wow.
That's how she first got to know who I was.
Well, since you're going to bring up that kind of trivia, I did some research and found out who else has done Food Junkie, and that was Mackenzie Phillips with the Jackson 5 on their TV show back in the 70s.
A good researcher. And that was the year they did that I got nominated for a Grammy. So I was at the awards, and I saw Michael Jackson there. And I went up to him and said, "Hey, man, thanks for doing my song on your show." And, back then, he was a kid, really. I mean,
right.
And he was, "Oh, yeah, that's cool, man. You wrote that song?" It was really fun.
Well, I tell you what, Judy Collins performs with the symphony. I would come back there to see that.
She's wonderful, and I'm glad that she's one of your wife's favorites, and hopefully yours, because she's a wonderful lady and so gracious, so beautiful, and such a great singer. Which you got to take your hat off. Not everybody can sing when they get above a certain age, but Judy can.
Oh, I
some of us can never sing. So
yeah, and I got to tell you, when we saw Judy a few months ago, she didn't miss a beat. Her voice was as strong as ever. So I agree. So let me ask you, what's next for Larry Groce?
Well, what I'm starting to do now is, now that I'm hanging up this the mountain stage, I started performing more. There's a band in town that I like to perform with. They're all guys that have been playing together for a long time. Do a lot of original music, a lot of oddball music, and we actually just went on a tour of Slovakia, believe it or not. We have a sister city to Charleston in Slovakia, and they wanted us to come over, and they set up a really nice tour of festivals and clubs and stuff like that. And we went over there and played, and the travel was horrendous, but the playing, once we got over there, once we got past the airplanes, it was a lot of fun. And I got to take it easy. I can't quite go like I used to, but I still like to sing. I've also started writing musicals. I've written a couple of them that have been produced here, and we're actually finishing another one that you probably noticed that the famous historian David McCullough just passed away at 89.
Yeah, I just read that yesterday, in fact.
Yeah, and his last book was called The Pioneers, and that book is about Marietta, Ohio, and how it was started and why it was important, not just as the first town on the other side of the Ohio River, but because of the charter, the Northwest Charter, and everything else. Well, me and another guy have written a musical, almost finished it now. We were inspired by McCullough's book, and we ended up doing a lot more research and doing other things that weren't in his book. But it's the story of how the people who settled Marietta were from Boston came down, and the big payoff, cut to the chase, is if it wasn't for that settlement and declaring the American Continental Congress making some rules about what was going to govern the land on the other side of the river in the Northwest Territory, one of those rules was no slavery. And if that hadn't have been done, this country would be very different.
Yeah, it would. Absolutely.
That's the kind of thing that I've been doing.
Well, Bob, I'm going to hold you to your promise. I think I'm going to call it a promise to come up to Mountain Stage in the next few months, especially if Miss Collins is performing, but even if she's not, because I haven't been to a show in a while, since before COVID, frankly, and this is the story of my life and timing. The last Mountain Stage show I had tickets for, Robert Plant was supposed to be there. And then COVID hit.
Yeah, COVID hit us very hard. We had a bunch of big names signed to do the show, including Robert Plant with his latest group from England. They were going to do only 12 dates, and they called us and wanted to do Mountain Stage. It was such an honor that they did that, and then it all had to be canceled, and he's never redone the tour. So that's, that was a sad thing. But that's what happens, you got to take the good with the bad, and over this many years, you just roll with the punches. So, you're welcome, Bob. Come up anytime you want. We have our 1,000th show happening on October the 9th, and I'm going to actually be host of that because Kathy will be out of town, and that'll be fun. We don't have any huge names, but we got some people you probably know. Sonny Landreth is on that show.
Oh, yeah.
He was one of the greatest slide guitarists ever. And Sonny's a friend of the show, been on many times. And then, as I say, next year, the 40th anniversary, and we'll and John will let you know if the thing with Judy Collins, it's in the works. You know, I hesitate to talk about it because obviously it's not done yet, but it's in the works. So if that happens, come on up and see Judy.
We'll even come up even if it doesn't, because like I said, I haven't been in a while, but I've been just about every time Robert Cray was there. So
he'll be back.
It's been a while, and I think one of the shows there was. I think you mentioned on one of the shows, one of the guests had been there 9 times, an Irish guitar player, and I think he had the record.
No. The record's Tim O'Brien. Has been on 36 times.
Holy God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Bob probably knows Tim too. Tim is famous, and he's won a couple of Grammys for folk and Americana music. And do you know Tim at all?
Yeah, I actually had an opportunity to meet him a few years back at Americana Fest here in Nashville.
Yeah. Tim's a great guy. He's from West Virginia originally. That's the reason he's been on so many times. He was on with his band Hot Rise back when we started in 83 or 84, and has been coming on regularly ever since. And we did a show at the Kennedy Center last year, and we want to make sure Tim was one of the guests there. I think we're going to do that again this coming year. But anyway, Tim is one of the people. We've had many. Bela Fleck's going to be on in December. He's been on 15 times. So you can tell the kind of people. John Hartford was on the show 10 times. So that's the kind of people we've had on Mountain Stage.
Well, Larry mentioned something, and we're gonna eventually let Larry go, I promise. But he mentioned something I wanted to go over just for a moment. He mentioned Mr. O'Brien from West Virginia, but Larry's in the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame, and that might not sound like much to somebody in Nashville. But Larry, why don't you tell Bob some of the folks that are in there? It's some pretty high cotton.
Yeah, the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame was set up by a guy who plays guitar on Mountain Stage. He's also a transplant. He's been here 48 years, and he loves it here just like I do. And he set it up to honor some of the people that people expect the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame to be full of bluegrass players, fiddlers, country musicians, old-time players, and there are plenty of those in there. But there's also Bill Withers, and many people don't even know that Bill was, from West Virginia. I mean, Kathy Mattea is in it, of course. Tim O'Brien's in it. Charlie McCoy, who I'm sure you've met.
Oh, yeah.
And Charlie's a great guy. He's a classic anchor to the whole thing. And some of the other guys that were in his band down there who are West Virginians. And there's people that were in jazz, in Johnny Johnson, Johnny Johnson had the band that Chuck Berry joined. And Johnny B. Good was really written about Johnny Johnson, even though he's a piano player.
I didn't know that.
There's a lot of folks like that in the Hall of Fame. So it's a lot of fun just to find out. Especially, it's some of it's trivia. Some of it, if you're from here, it's very interesting. And some is kind of, Bill Withers. You don't really get much bigger than that when it comes to eclectic music that everybody from folk people to rappers have liked.
And what about I apologize, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but the gentleman who wrote Some Kind of Wonderful.
Yeah, John Ellison. He's from here, too. And we've gotten to be friends with his, and he plays with that band sometimes that I play with. He comes down. He lives in Florida. He's got 2 houses, Florida and Toronto, but he still comes down here and plays when we get some gigs, and he's quite the character. And speaking of somebody, he's about Judy Collins' age, but you would never know that in a million years if you see him and hear him sing and watch him move around. Unbelievable.
And another, I think, was, I apologize, I'm just having a memory lapse on some of these names, but the gentleman who played lead guitar for Neil Young and Crazy Horse.
Yeah, he didn't play lead. No, he played rhythm guitar, but
okay.
Pancho, and what's his last name? Pancho. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, he was in Crazy Horse for years, and but he's not in there yet. But he's nominated. He'll probably get in.
You're talking about Frank San Pedro, who is from West Virginia.
Right. He was born there, and he wasn't raised totally there, but he still claims it. And, he's a funny guy. He's very funny. And, he was a big deal for many years. He was one of the guys in Crazy Horse. West Virginians have an odd twist sometimes that I love. They're unpredictable, and, that's what I love the most about people from here. Little Jimmy Dickens is from here. I know you know who he is.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the Hall of Fame.
Well, and I think we've got to remember, too, that when we talk about the birthplace of country music, it wasn't Nashville. And it's really its roots are the Appalachians, and it's that mountain music that West Virginia is so intertwined with. So I get it, absolutely.
No, you're exactly right. And we did Mountain Stage went for 5 years straight down to Bristol, where they established the original, what was it called, Beginning of Country Music Museum down there, and we helped them get that started. And we tried to bring people, all kinds of people, because people forget that country music owes a thanks to African music. And people say, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, have you ever heard the banjo? Where do you think that came from?" And it's all. So we actually brought Robert Cray down there as one of our guests down there, and we brought Martina McBride down. Along with all the people that you would expect to be down there, Ralph Stanley, and those kind of folks. And we brought Odetta. We brought Ramblin' Jack Elliott down there. I'm sure that Bob knows him too. So these are all the kinds of people that Mountain Stage has championed over the years.
Well, Bob, once again, I'm going to hold you to a visit, but to frighten Larry a little bit, Bob and I's last concert together was Dream Theater. It's a progressive metal band.
There you go.
And they played 2 hours, and they played 9 songs. And it was great. And where was that? Was that at Opryland, Bob?
Yeah, that was at the Opry House at Opryland, yeah.
The two people that hold the record for playing the most songs in 20 minutes. Usually a Mountain Stage guest plays 20 to 25 minutes. And it's between a bluegrass band and They Might Be Giants. Each of them played 9 songs in 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I tell you what, Randy Newman could play, if you listen to his songs. He did the show. He did a lot of 2.5-minute songs, too.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a lot of music in a short amount of time.
No joke. But then many times when the songwriters ask you, and I'm sure you probably told people the same thing, what can I do to make my songs better? I said, make them shorter.
Make them shorter. Yeah.
Go time the Hank Williams and the Beatles songs and see how long they were.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. Nice to meet you and nice to be on this show, and good luck with the podcast. It's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it, and I enjoy what I've heard when I listen.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.